There are some questions that almost everyone ends up asking at the beginning of their time in EVE Online, but this one comes to most people a couple of weeks in. At some point you're going to see a system full of people with a naming scheme like Asteroid Miner 1, Asteroid Miner 2, Asteroid Miner 3, up to some ridiculous number, and you're going to ask, do I have to multibox to enjoy this game? Right away I'm going to TLDR this entire video, which is a bit of a bold strategy this early on, but if that sounds like your exact situation right now and you just want a straightforward answer before you sink any more time into this game, then no. You do not have to multibox in EVE Online, neither for enjoyment nor truly for efficiency. For those completely unfamiliar with the concept, multiboxing is when one player has more than one game client open at a time, essentially playing as two or more accounts at the same time. Yes, this is allowed, and yes, it is quite common. EVE, more so than really any other MMO I can think of, with the possible exception of EverQuest, is very supportive of multiboxing. From the developer's perspective, it's more subscriptions, and from the player perspective, it's convenience to perform what would usually be group tasks entirely on your own. It's not completely open season though, there are some limitations on multiboxing. First of all, you can only do this with Omega accounts. These are the paid subscription tier for EVE Online. You cannot run and operate multiple alpha free accounts at the same time. The game client will stop you from doing so in principle, but if you find yourself a workaround in practice, this is against the terms of service and you will catch yourself a ban. Secondly, you cannot use any software which replicates inputs between clients. For example, pressing F1 to shoot your weapon on one account and having a software transmit that key input to every other account and all your weapons shooting simultaneously would be against the rules. This certainly hasn't stopped plenty of multiboxes reaching near simultaneous inputs across accounts though. EVE having 1-second ticks and efficient multibox switching software like Evo Preview means that with practice you can pull off some crazy stuff as a multiboxer. So much so that there's this impression sometimes from newer players that a multiboxer has to be input broadcasting to be performing so well. In reality, it's more likely than you think that they're well within the rules and have just perfectly optimized their setup for fast inputs. There's no shortage of examples of this available on YouTube if you're interested in exactly what's possible. What I want to look at though are the activities that are made easier by multiboxing so that new players can make their own decision on whether multiboxing is for them. There are fundamentally 3 types of multiboxing in my opinion. The most common but considerably less noticeable type is utility multiboxing. This means having multiple accounts trained into slightly different specializations, allowing a player to diversify their activities without one incredibly long training queue on just one character. Some examples of this are mining boosters, industry jobs, and Sinos. It's very common for players to train these skills on something other than their main account, as they're very specific tasks with high skill point investment and potentially infrequent use. Even simpler though is a scout account. The necessity for such an account is lower in higher security areas of space, but players almost anywhere can benefit from having an account able to scout the system ahead before their primary account jumps into that system. This can be used to avoid ganks and gate camps, as well as scout for targets with a much less threatening pilot. There's plenty of players who won't interrupt their crabbing and warp to safety over a young account in a shuttle, but that account could be using D-Scan to identify your location, ready for a player's main account to jump in and warp directly to you. I call this utility multiboxing because it's allowing a player to use another account as a tool for a specific job. It's likely that outside of performing that specialty, the account remains docked or logged off. I know this is how I use my multibox accounts most of the time. Besides the various admin accounts that I've accrued by being CEO of 4 different holding corps over the last few years, I have separately trained Sino hunting, capital pilot, and scanning accounts. Now that I've been playing for as long as I have, there's a lot more overlap in the account's capabilities than there used to be, but it did give me a head start on doing such a variety of content early into my time in EVE Online. Utility multiboxing is the main thing you should consider if you're new to the game, and depending on the utility in question, you might not even need to multibox. Instead, you could have the skills trained on one of your 2 extra slots on your main Omega account, or in a separate Alpha account that you log in and out of as necessary. The convenience of having them open at the same time is undeniable though. The second type of multiboxing is activity multiboxing. I call it this because rather than just saving you some extra training time or adding a little convenience to something, it allows you to engage in an activity that would not have been possible solo. This might be single-handedly reinforcing an enemy structure, doing high-tier frigate abyssal runs, doing incursion sites, or running homefront operations. There are definitely a lot more examples, but they do tend to be quite niche to exactly what parts of EVE you enjoy and take part in. This is probably the least common kind of multiboxing, mostly because of the high input or investment required from the player to solo play activities designed for multiple people playing together. These are usually very lucrative in the hands of a practiced and experienced multiboxer though. New players really need not worry about this kind of multiboxing, as there are far better ways to make ISK without setting such a difficult goal early on. Finally, the type of multiboxing that I think comes to most people's minds whenever the topic comes up is what I call multiplier multiboxing. So unlike utility multiboxing, there's no convenience factor or specialization, and unlike activity multiboxing, these accounts are usually doing something that's perfectly possible to do alone. What's different is that players will be doing that activity across many different accounts in parallel. It's a lot less common than people think, especially at a large scale, but it draws the most eyes because it's incredibly hard to miss when people are doing this. Mining and ratting are good examples of multiplier multiboxing, since as long as there are resources available to be extracted, more accounts just translates into a linear increase in income for the player. They're both very low APM activities too. Ratters running in drone boats typically only need to make a handful of inputs across the 20-minute site runtime, and with hotkey compression, multibox mining is easier than it has ever been. Multiplier multiboxing seems very appealing at first, but in order to run efficiently and effectively, it usually requires every one of the accounts to be well skilled in an activity. This leads to a large investment of either time training or ISK spent on skill injectors to bring every account up to skill parity. For that reason, this is also something new players should avoid the allure of, since it really can sting to put that much investment into an activity only to find that you don't actually enjoy it. I actually have a particular problem with multiplier multiboxing, and I say that as someone who has done it and occasionally still does it. People often talk about multiboxing being bad for the game, and that's a very valid debate to be had, even if it's probably a pointless one, seeing as CCP are definitely not going to change their tune on it. But what people don't talk about enough, in my opinion, is how this kind of multiboxing can be done responsibly or irresponsibly. Let me give an example. Let's say a nullsec player has 10 accounts, they carefully watch CCP's various sales and pay for all those subscriptions with real money, they train them all up into a drone boat like the Ishtar, and since they play a lot during their alliance's off time zone, they have no shortage of Forsaken hubs to spin their ship on. This player sells some of their escalations to others in the alliance, sells their salvage to alliance mates when they can be bothered to salvage, and has a couple of their accounts trained up with the alliance's doctrine ships. This is very much a best case scenario for responsible multiplier multiboxing. This kind of behavior brings more revenue to CCP, takes full advantage of your alliance's resources, and supports the alliance's regional economy. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have another nullsec player who, for this example, let's say mines asteroid ore deposits. They pay for their subscriptions using in-game ISK that they get from mining to buy Plex. They play during their alliance's peak time, and they know that they have to act fast to get the best sites before anyone else. Bonus points if the alliance market is too small to take on this player's mineral selling and Plex buying, so both are imported or exported from a major high-sec trade hub respectively. This is a worst case scenario for irresponsible multiplier multiboxing, and usually the kind of behavior that provokes the negative sentiment towards multiboxers. These players, while acting well within the rules of the game, are often like a parasite to the alliances they operate in. They use their large number of accounts to deny content that would otherwise satisfy multiple other players, and they take money out of their local economy and put it directly into CCP's pocket for a subscription fee, and they often just keep on scaling up in a constant race against efficiency. You know that song that did the rounds a few years ago by the Stupendium with the line, "We work to earn the right to work"? It's basically that in EVE Online. Multiplier multiboxing has a tendency to become a closed loop, in which a player is devouring in-game resources like a plague of locusts just to pay CCP for the right to do the same next month. It's slightly less egregious if all the involved transactions take place within the local economy, but you'd be surprised how large an alliance needs to be to stomach even just a couple of these players without a need for import or export. With those three types of multiboxing in mind, consider which you are actually trying to achieve, and make sure if you're multiboxing to make more money in-game, that you're not just chasing your own tail to pay for the subscriptions of those very same accounts. CCP has a wide variety of sales available, and with expert systems in reward tracks as well as the occasional free week of Omega, there are opportunities to test the waters of multiboxing without any big commitments. The truth is, a lot of the multiboxing you notice is the multiplier kind, and as a solo pilot paying for your own subscription with real money, you might be surprised at how similar your in-game income is when everything's said and done. Thanks for watching, and in a slightly different end to most videos, I just wanted to bring up EVE Online's new Creator Awards annual event. Nominations close mid-March 2026, and if you've enjoyed any of my content over the last few months, I'd love to have your nomination for New Content Creator of the Year. Even if I'm not your pick, I highly recommend nominating whoever you want to see recognised at FanFest this year. If you want to help support the channel, consider buying your next EVE Online pack, subscription, or Plex from markydragon.com using the link in the video description. Use coupon code BILL at checkout for 3% off your order. I've also got YouTube membership enabled now. It's 99 cents, and for that you'll get access to my monthly video where I go through some of the interesting comments for each month, more of an unscripted rant if I'm honest, and I'm sure I'll have more casual unscripted content available for members too, as and when the mood arises. I really appreciate everyone that already signed up, as it's all helped me invest in the software and hardware I need to keep making better videos.